Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Colonel Eric Megardumian with Seminar 10, Academic Year 25. And I've been asked by Colonel and Dr. Heather Witt for me to be able to generate a little bit of an understanding of how we utilize AI to get a broader and a deeper understanding of the subjects that we're studying in the Army War College. And so I'm going to give you an overview. And the NotebookLM is what most of the student body has decided to use as a narrow AI because it gives you the opportunity to be able to upload specific sources in this area over here, and it will only reference those sources when you're communicating with a language model. Over here in this section, this is a chat area, and this is where you're able to interface a language model. And there's a studio section over here that has some preset capabilities that the language model can execute. So let's start importing some sources, and we're going to use the European RSP, so RSP Europe. And as an example, we're going to pull lesson 02 out. I'm going to go through and pull out all of the PDFs that were required readings, and I'm going to pull those into it. There's also 2 PowerPoint presentations I've converted to PDF already, and I'm dropping those into NotebookLM. So as we see, it's starting to upload those, but there was one source that was a URL. So I'm going to come back in, open up this website, and copy and paste that URL in order for me to drop it back into Google NotebookLM. And again, you have the opportunity for Google Drive, paste, copy text, but you can also drop in YouTube and also websites. In this case, we're selecting website and dropping in the URL. You can see it's starting to digest that URL, and it's understanding already that the subject today is about understanding European Union institutions and functions, but we're going to relabel this as RSP Europe, Lesson 2. Okay, so now that we have this, it's extracted just a paragraph overview. It's gone through all of the sources. And now I have the opportunity to be able to deselect and select specific sources if I only wanted to reference those. Maybe these 4, I can deselect them. And I can choose which sources I want the language model to utilize when responding to my input. Now, as a technique, what I've developed is over the course of the Army War College is I'll write digital notes that helps me capture all of the information from each lesson and then consolidate those into each block of instruction. So in this case, we're going to label this RSP Europe Lesson 2, Notes from the Reading. And we're going to call this the briefing document because there's some very interesting capabilities that are standard with each workbook that NotebookLM provides you that I'm going to show you right now. Now over here on the studio portion of it, there's a briefing document. There is also a timeline and a frequently asked questions. I found these 3 are very beneficial. The study guide does not provide that much of beneficial information, but I'm going to select and request it to dub out for me a briefing document, a timeline, and frequently asked questions. And so it's already generated those for us. So now I'm going to go into the first one. This is the briefing document. The nice part about the briefing document is it's very concise, at the same time very thorough, and it's a great overview. If you were to read one thing that gives you an orientation of what the subject matter is that we're talking about in class tomorrow, or to give you an overview before you dive into the readings, this is that one source that you can go to get a very quick overview of the subject. Now, I've also extracted frequently asked questions and a timeline, so I'm going to develop another note here for the timeline. I'm going to go back to the studio. I'm going to select the note that I developed for the timeline. And I'm going to extract out of this the detailed timeline of made events. So any time periods that it provides, it will also give you that information. The other nice part about it is it also gives you a cast of characters. So there's any key names that pop up multiple times, it identifies those and pulls them out and gives you a little bit of a bio or history behind those individuals. So now that we've incorporated the briefing document and the timeline, I'm going to go to frequently asked questions. Now what I found is that these frequently asked questions are actually pretty thoughtful questions, and there's a 1 paragraph answer behind them. So there is some interesting value in extracting these as well to consolidate in the notes. So if you were just to stop here and read this, it gives you a great overview of what the intent is to understand the subjects that we're going to be discussing in class the next day. But what we also have the opportunity to do is go back in and also put down our points to consider. And for this, we'll reference the information provided by our faculty. We'll pull that in. Let's go find lesson 02. Here it is. And then now we'll look for our points to consider. I'm going to copy all of these and paste them here. I'm going to start building this out for us now. I'm going to give myself just a little bit of space so I can insert some of the answers that the language model gives me. So I'm going to copy the first one and place it in here. Now again, it's using only those sources that are in the left column over there. And so I've entered in the first question, and it's going to start working on that. Now while it's doing that, I'll copy and then paste the second question. And I'll wait until the first answer is complete. So I've entered and selected the second question. I'm copying and pasting the first question in. I'm going to continue this throughout the points to consider. Copying the third one, pasting the third question. I'm going to go back, copy, and paste the second answer to question B. I'm just spacing this out just because it makes it a little bit easier for me to break out those questions a little bit more. Copying the fourth question into the language model, copying this the answer to the third question, and I'll copy and paste the fifth question here momentarily. And scrolling down to get the copy and paste of the final question. Okay, so now we have a briefing document, a timeline, frequently asked questions, all the questions for the points to consider, and some answers that the language model extracted from the sources that we gave it. So my first step is I'm going to read through this entire document because it gives me a very good understanding. And then what I'll do is when I go into the readings, I'm much more efficient and much more effective in going and finding those particular pieces of information, highlighting them, and understand the context behind some of these questions and interesting facts from the readings. And that way I'm able to be much more efficient and effective with the reading. Now, the other thing I'm going to bring you to attention to is this deep dive conversation. It's really a podcast. And so it's now generating a conversation of all the sources that we've given it. And it has the ability to be able to generate those voices automatically. And it's going to take a little bit of time for that to occur. So while it's doing that, this is a new function that NotebookLM came up with, and that's the mind map. And it's generating a mind map based on the readings that or the sources that we provided it. So now as we open this up, we'll scroll out a little bit. It talks about the EU fundamentals. And you can open this up a little bit deeper and understand where some of these subjects fall and nest under each other. But if you have any questions, you can close them, open them, and if you were to click on any of these, it will take you to and will insert that question or that subject into the chat window of NotebookLM, where we can start to get a little bit more understanding. So if I have a specific question in reference to the European Common challenges or common commercial policies, it will bring up an answer to that question, and I can save that question as a note. So it's just another way for me to be able to rapidly understand how all the information is nested. And you can add notes, you can develop audio overviews, And you can also go back in here and extract more information if you wanted to. And that won't leave on the studio portion of it. Anytime I log into this workbook, that information is still going to be available. But I accidentally double tapped that, so I'm going to delete that. All right. So now that we've created this Word document, we've reviewed that Word document, we're not complete yet because that's just in preparation for the courses. What I'm going to do over here is give myself a little bit more room to copy down notes from lecture and also notes from class. Now what I have done in the past is record the notes from the lecture and then inserted that into NotebookLM, had it digest it and provide for me notes so that I can pay more attention to the instructor or the briefer than frantically writing down notes. And so I can insert those notes there after the classes and the lecture is complete. All right, so now the overview is complete. Let's take a listen to what it sounds like.
So really our mission today is to give you a clear and insightful understanding of where the EU stands and what are the big forces that are going to shape its future.
Exactly. And we'll be exploring those different layers of integration, the ideas about where this is all headed and what it all means for the individual countries, especially in light of things like increased migration, which we'll get into a bit later.
All right, so to understand where we are now, let's go back to the beginning.
Okay.
When did this idea of a really deeply integrated Europe actually start to take shape?
Well, the EU as we know it today was officially established in 1992 with the Maastricht Treaty. The roots go back much earlier to the aftermath of World War II.
Makes sense.
McBride, one of the authors we're looking at, points out that the core motivation back then was to prevent another devastating conflict
Right.
by, fostering these closer economic ties and promoting cooperation. It started with a small group,
Yeah.
just 6 founding members back in 1951. And our key facts source actually reminds us who they were. Belgium, France, Germany, Italy, Luxembourg, and the Netherlands.
So it's really like, a small group.
Okay, I think you get a gist of what its capabilities are, and there's 24 minutes of that. Now, the other nice thing about this is that there is an interactive beta mode where you can pause the actual discussion and inject questions for it to consider. In addition to that, there's an opportunity here for you to be able to download and save this and drop it into your Lesson 2 notes and or share that with anyone that you may want to. And so I'm going to continue to build this Lesson 2 Europe folder that I have. And I'm going to make sure that all the information that I have available there has been captured in the Lesson 2 Word document. I'm going to save this as European Lesson 2. And as an example, and I save that on my computer for class the next day. Now, we've already talked about the points to consider, but now the question is, how do we prepare to write for some of the prompts provided in the directive? And so I have already created, decided that a concern that I have is Chinese economic influence over the EU in Europe, and I see that to be a concern. So I'm going to type in here, I assess that Chinese economic trade practices within the European Union, etc. And I'm going to now ask it, what sources support this argument? Now, the important part is I recognize that this is backwards, but I do want to be able to cite some of the information, and I know that this is a fact, but I just need to have some of the information that's coming from it. And I can go to these different sources and identify exactly what it is and where it's written. So this one was in Lesson 2, required reading number 2, EU challenges ahead, and there is the verbiage that it's utilized to provide that portion of the answer. Now the other thing I can say is, I can continue to have a conversation with it. Say, what can the U.S. do to assist the EU in preventing Chinese economic actions within the EU? And so again, it's going to go through all those sources and kind of give you a couple different options. Now, these are great to be able to jog your understanding of, what are some of those things that I feel passionate about. And then I can turn around and say, okay, well, what are some of the indicators that the EU is under Chinese economic pressure? And so we'll list out a couple options there as far as indicators of the pressure that the EU is facing under China. Now, this is only for lesson 2. So what we can do is we can come back out. And I have consolidated all the required readings and those lessons learned into one workbook labeled European RSP or Europe RSP. And you can see down here all my notes for Europe 6, Block 7, 8, 1, 2, 3. All of these notes that I've taken are now consolidated into this one workbook that consists of 49 different sources. And so really, I can start to prepare and research using this. And I can also execute an audio overview of the entirety of the European lesson learned. And so I can enter in a prompt over here, but instead of just focusing on the EU, now this will pull in information from all the different sources within the Europe RSP. While it's doing that, I'll take a good look, and this is what the mind map looks like for the Europe RSP. Now, obviously here what I can do is go in and select, open up, dive deeper into any of these subjects if I want, and by simply clicking on any of these subjects, I can force it to enter that information into the chat and extract whatever information I want out of the language model. All right, so it's developed those answers for us. So we're going to go ahead and review those and see if there's anything interesting there. And I can back out now because we also have, we've taken a look at the Europe RSP Lesson 2, Europe RSP. But now what we're going to do is we're going to come over to the Comp Study Tool. And what I've done here in the Comp Study Tool is consolidate 291 sources of required readings and important strategic documents to include all the lessons notes that I've taken from all the different classes, and they're all consolidated now into 291 sources. So for all intents and purposes, this comps study tool is the entirety of the Army War College. And so as we prepare for comps, we can pick a question here and start here to digest potential options that we may want to pursue in answering some of the questions. So evaluating the role of partners and allies in a region of our choice. And so I'm going to copy that into here. And I'm going to pick specifically Europe since that's where I'm deploying to, and that's where my RSP was. So here I have an opportunity to kind of focus my studies in preparation for the comps to answer questions that are particular to Europe and what I've studied throughout the course. So now it's going to go through the entirety of the Army War College notes and readings in order for it to extract information. Now again, it's important to note that none of this is done off of the internet or at least a worldwide web looking for different sources. So all that it is accessing is the sources that I gave it. And so now it's provided me a couple different options here that I can dive deeper into. I can save that as a note. Now the reason why it's important to save it as a note is because I can share this document with other people. As you can see here right now, I've shared it with a number of different individuals, and everyone who's on this shared workbook has access to the sources and also everything that is in the studio on the right. Everything in the middle, that chat with the language model, is temporary, and it is for the individual users. So whatever any chats go in between a user and the language model stays amongst them. I don't get to see what they have asked. unless they were to save it as a note and place it into the studio column on the right. So now we're going to say, now apply some complex adaptive systems to this discussion. And how is Europe, the EU, NATO, and the US considered to be a complex adaptive system? And so it's going to go through, extract out, try to understand what a complex adaptive system is, and then turn around and apply it to this relationship. Now, it's important to note that I'm accepting a little bit of risk here because I didn't define or have that conversation about complex adaptive systems first. And so it's having a little bit of a hard time going back into our chat history and predicting exactly what I'm looking for. It's broken this down into EU, NATO, and the US. So in terms of prompt engineering, I'm going to have to get probably a little bit more explicit. And so let's see if we can't find other frameworks or models that we can prompt the system to go into the sources and extract. So let's put in what other frameworks discussed in the sources can be used or applied to help express the complexity of the EU and NATO relationships in terms of, let's call it the acute threat of Russia. And let's see what that generates for us. All right, so this is thinking here now. I hope that it generates a couple different frameworks. There's DIME, strategic empathy, systems thinking, and I can ask it to dive a little bit deeper if I want, but I think you understand the gist. So I'm going to back out and show you a little bit broader of how else that you can use the AI model in other areas of our careers. I should also say before I do that, oral comps over here, I have developed all the notes, dropped it in, and now I'm able to go through and develop a folder for each one of the oral comps, develop its own deep dive conversation, and give myself notes that I can use to study to answer any comps questions that do come up. And so that's just another way that we could prepare for the comps. If you have any questions, again, my name is Colonel Eric Megardumian, and that can be found on the Global. Thank you for your attention. Have a good day.